Hello, this is Spencer, Oncology Pharmacy Resident, and for this clinical pearl, I'll be talking about hazardous medication exposure and exposure testing. A brief background on the importance of monitoring for hazardous drug exposure. In 2004, NIOSH issued a statement regarding preventing occupational exposures to anti-neoplastics and other hazardous drugs in the healthcare setting. This was particularly important as it brought to the forefront what had been published in literature previously that working with or near hazardous drugs in healthcare settings may cause skin rashes, infertility, miscarriages, birth defects, and possibly leukemia or other cancers. With the number of hazardous drugs handled each year continuing to climb, it's easy to see why it would be important to protect healthcare workers from potentially being exposed to hazardous drugs. One way to help safeguard the protection of the healthcare workforce would be to test for levels of marker drugs. And so what this would do is give us a way to quantitatively test for workforce exposure levels and the risk of exposure to the hazardous drugs. Now getting into the current recommendations. So this issue was addressed in USP Chapter 800, which recommends using environmental sampling to detect uncontained hazardous drugs, stating that this quality measure should be performed routinely. Recommendations for sampling would be initially as a benchmark and at least every 6 months or more often as needed to verify containment. So if the sampling showed that there was no potential exposure, then you could continue on testing at every 6 months. But if there was exposure detected through sampling, then procedures possibly would need to be reviewed, potential changes to the procedures would need to be implemented, and then retested to ensure that there was no exposure. In USP Chapter 800, there are areas recommended to be sampled, and those include the containment primary, engineering control and equipment contained inside, staging work areas near the containment primary engineering control or areas adjacent to that CPEC, as well as patient administration areas. And then again, more rationale for wipe sampling is that it would provide quantitative measurement to reduce occupational exposure to hazardous drugs, as well as it would be able to support the need to reevaluate practice, incorporate new devices or products or procedures, as well as help gain buy-in from administration to implement changes. The product that Monument Health currently uses to detect any environmental exposure to hazardous drugs, mainly the anti-neoplastics, is the Chemo. Chemo is a tool to help monitor and detect environmental exposure to common anti-neoplastic agents, such as those listed on this slide. It should be noted that with each wipe sample that Chemo supplies, only up to 5 medications can be tested for. So here's what the wipe sampling kit contains. So as you can see, it comes in this brightly colored box, and on the inside it comes with vial containers with wiping solution, as you can see on the left here. Then on the top right, those are the wipe sampling swabs. Below that is just the sort of instruction sheets as well as the site map form, so you're able to document which sites you are actively sampling. And then on the bottom is just the additional packaging to put the wipe sample vials in for shipment back to the testing facility. So getting into the areas that we decided to test. So here's a picture of our IV hood, and on the bottom left in the square you can see that we tested our work surface within our chemotherapy hood, as well as our picture capturing platform. So we use a third-party software which captures pictures of the chemotherapy compounding process so that a pharmacist can review and verify final chemotherapy compounds outside of the IV room. As you can see, the picture capturing platform does have some grooves in it, making it a little bit harder to clean and has potential for then hazardous drug exposure. Third area that we chose to sample is the workbench within our medication storage room, because this is where we unpack the shipments of medications when they come in daily. So the fourth area we chose to sample is our medication pass-through, and so this is the window within our satellite cancer care pharmacy where nurses are able to come pick up the medications that need to be administered for the patients. The fifth area that we chose to sample would be a keyboard inside one of the infusion bays. So we wanted to see if the nursing staff was getting any of the hazardous drug onto their gloves and then potentially passing it onto any of the work surfaces. Getting into our Chemo results, the medications we looked for potential exposure to were paclitaxel, 5-fluorouracil, cyclophosphamide, doxorubicin, and etoposide. So as you can see from the graphic, there was no potential exposure to any of the medications within the pass-through where the nurse picks up the medication, the keyboard and mouse within the infusion bay, or from the countertop within our medication storage room. However, 5-fluorouracil was detected both on the IV hood work surface as well as the camera dosage platform. As you can see, the camera dosage platform also detected levels of cyclophosphamide. With the results, our next steps were to reevaluate our current work practices, and we felt fairly content with the results. The only area where we saw room for improvement was within the IV hood as well as the picture platform. So our strategy was to inform the pharmacy technicians to incorporate more frequent cleaning of the IV hood work surface as well as a more vigorous cleaning of the picture platform. And then to ensure that we are reducing the potential exposure, to repeat the wipe sampling within those same areas to help validate that our efforts are proven successful. From this clinical pearl, I hope you're able to see the importance of wipe sample studies and how they help limit healthcare worker exposure to hazardous drugs. If you have any questions about this presentation, feel free to email me at slehman1@monument.health.